now we are doing chapter 2. So the first chapter is on her and him, their relationship and how they met. Chapter 2 is her and him and their relationship. So let's get started. Her name is Janelle. So it starts with her point of view. I grew up in Bountiful, Utah, and was raised in the LDS faith. My mother had met some Mormon missionaries while in college, and after she graduated, having converted to Mormonism, she moved to Utah to be with others of her faith. My father died when I was 2 years old, and my mother remarried. But my stepfather is not a hands-on father. He was a distant and emotionally unavailable. Eventually, my mother divorced him. I knew when I got married and had children of my own, I would look for a man who would be intimately engaged in every aspect of our children's lives. One of the things instilled in you if you grow up LDS is that you're living the only true faith. Nothing else will get you to eternal exaltation. Toward the end of high school, I met a student named Adam, with whom I was quite taken. I knew he wasn't Mormon, which meant we had no hope of being together unless he converted. I called my grandmother and told her about the boy I had a crush on. She recognized his name and remembered that his family had at one time lived next door to her. They're in the Klan, my grandmother told me. Many of my relatives are still down south, and to Southerners there is only one clan, the Ku Klux Klan. I was shocked and told my grandmother so. My reaction made her laugh. They're not in that clan, my grandmother exclaimed. They're polygamous. Until my grandmother told me this, I had no idea polygamists actually existed, let alone lived among us. I had grown up in the LDS Church of Utah, but I was unaware that there was such a thing as polygamy. I thought it was a myth or something from the early days of Mormonism, an old-fashioned tradition that had long since been abandoned. Adam was not completely committed to his fundamentalist faith, and I was happy to welcome him to the LDS Church. Not long after he converted, we began courting. Soon, we were married in the temple, but my husband wasn't really interested in either his new faith or the branch of fundamentalism he'd been raised in. In fact, he had very little spiritual conviction. His family, however, fascinated me. I would tell my friends, my in-laws are polygamists. I was proud to know people in a subculture. They were novelty. One of the reasons I was transfixed by Adam's relatives was that they were so outwardly normal. In fact, they were completely conventional and contemporary. They didn't live behind closed doors or practice any strange customs. They worked, they participated in the community, they sent their kids to local schools. My in-laws didn't dress as some fundamentalist sects did. The women were strong and independent and had an equal say in family affairs with their husbands. If I only had been as enamored with my husband as I was with his family. Unfortunately, Adam and I had problems right from the start. We weren't spiritually, emotional, or romantically compatible. We'd lived together for only 6 months before he moved out. Although my husband and I had separated, I remained close to his family, including Adam's brother Mary, who is sister wife number 1. Little did I know how close we'd eventually become. At first, I have to admit it was the novelty that drew me to them. then I began to feel emotionally invested in them. I enjoyed their larger gatherings and the complex and generous notion of family that they presented. At the time, Adam's father had 4 wives and too many children to count. Some are adults like my husband, and some were still in elementary school. Adam's parents went out of their way to include me in their events to make me feel welcome in their lives. Their group were close-knit and inviting. Even though I was still a member of the LDS Church, I was always welcome to attend their religious gatherings. One evening, they invited me to a fireside presentation, which is an informal spiritual get-together. My ex-wife's sister, Mary, was there. Since I had married her brother, I was friendly with Mary, and I knew she was dating a young man, Cody Brown, with whom she was clearly smitten. Although Mary talked about Cody a great deal, I had never met him. That evening, when Cody walked into the house to join the party, the strangest feeling washed over me. I felt as if I had forgotten something and suddenly remembered it. It was a feeling of relief and recognition, but I was in the middle of a horrible divorce, and I had no idea how to handle the sensation Cody's entrance conjured in me. So I packed it away and made a mental note to deal with it later. My divorce was not yet final, so I attended certain functions with my estranged husband. One of these was Mary and Cody's wedding. If you look at their wedding pictures, you will see me and my ex-husband in several of the photos. Cody and Mary made a wonderful couple. They were so... sorry. Hi, guys. If you look at several of their wedding photos, you will see me and my ex-husband in several of their photos. Cody and Mary were a wonderful couple. They were so young and so much in love. They were like teenagers, silly and goofy. At their wedding, I had never imagined that one day I joined their family. In fact, I hadn't yet considered converting to their faith. A little more than a year after my own wedding, my divorce was finalized, and my husband lost touch with me and spent very little time with his family, but I grew closer to my former in-laws, and I entered their family by marriage and stayed when the marriage was over. Now we're in to Cody's point of view. Even when Mary and I were newlyweds, entering the principle of plural marriage was always at the back of our minds. I had a sense in my heart that was something I needed to do when I was young. I had seen older men marrying women who had children by their first husbands. I didn't think I should or could bring people's children into my life and merge my family with someone else's. At the time, I felt this would be a disruption to the children and uncomfortable for the ex-husband. After Mary and I were married, Janelle was off on the pre-year of our lives. We both knew that Janelle had endured a rough period during her short-lived marriage, and we wanted to make sure she remained close with Mary's family despite the divorce. We, as well as Mary's parents, were looking out for Janelle purely because we cared about her. There was never any thought in my mind or in Mary's of Janelle becoming a wife. Mary and I often invite Janelle out for pizza or a movie. The women had developed a friendship of their own, independent of Mary's brother. And through Mary got to know Janelle, our friendship was entirely platonic, but I recognized Janelle's intelligence and conviction always flowed easily between us. Janelle has always been career-minded. When I first met her, she worked in marketing communications, but then she switched to human resources at an employment agency. I always seemed to be working Kansas Street jobs, Ray and I were still living in our carefree existence and hadn't settled on the logical career path.